The sound of the helicopter blades had long faded, but the silence it left behind was a scar. It was a stillness that spoke of loss, of a world ripped apart by human greed and the devastating echo of a poacher's bullet. This is where the story of the calf begins. A 3-month-old white rhino, small enough to be carried, but too wounded to stand. His name was Nandi, and he arrived at the sanctuary utterly alone, carrying the crushing weight of instinctual terror in his tiny frame. Now let's enter their world. If you're already enjoying this story, a quick like and share makes all the difference. Let us know in the comments where you're listening from. Today. The sanctuary, nestled in the vast, quiet expanse of the South African bushveld, was a place of last chances. It was a haven built by human compassion to mend the damage caused by human violence. For the hundreds of orphaned animals who had passed through its gates, the goal was simple: survival, and, if possible, a return to the wild. But the sheer trauma of Nandi's arrival, the frantic search for a mother who would never return, made the task of healing him monumental. He refused the bottle, paced his enclosure, and displayed the classic, devastating signs of separation anxiety. The vets knew he needed a mother figure, a calm, grounding presence that could override the raw, biological panic of being alone. The team looked beyond his own species, past the other rhinos who might be aggressive or confused by the young calf's distress. They settled on an old dairy cow named Sheba. She was a gentle creature brought to the sanctuary years earlier after a farming accident. She was calm, predictable, and had never been a mother herself, making her maternal response an unknown quantity. Sheba lived in a pasture adjacent to the main rhino enclosures, a quiet, reassuring silhouette against the savanna horizon. Her presence was a calculated risk, a Hail Mary attempt to introduce a non-threatening, large, warm body into Nandi's shattered world. The introduction was cautious, taking place over days of quiet observation. Nandi, wary and thin, would occasionally glance at the cow through the fence line. Sheba, unbothered, would simply graze, her heavy rhythmic chewing providing a grounding sound in the anxious air. This simple coexistence was the first fragile seed of hope. But what no one could have predicted was that the cow, who had never known motherhood, possessed a well of pure maternal instinct that was waiting for the perfect, broken creature to pour itself into. The sanctuary had provided a home, but Sheba was about to provide a family. The day they finally opened the gate between them felt less like a carefully planned scientific experiment and more like a whispered prayer. Nandi, driven by an ache deeper than hunger, moved stiffly toward the large brown and white shape. He approached tentatively, his movement still jerky from anxiety, sniffing the foreign scent of dairy and hay. Sheba did not move. She simply stood, absorbing the young animal's distress. For a long, suspended moment, the air was thick with the weight of expectation. The entire sanctuary staff held its breath. Then it happened. Nandi, in a final desperate act of seeking comfort, nudged his head against Sheba's flank. Instead of stepping away, the cow let out a low, soft moo, a sound utterly unlike the panicked calls Nandi had known. She took one step, not away, but slightly closer, pressing her heavy body gently against the calf. It was the first physical comfort he had received since his mother's death. It was not a gesture of friendship or play. It was pure, unadulterated acceptance. From that initial hesitant touch, the relationship between Sheba and Nandi solidified into a daily routine that was both practical and deeply emotional. The cow became Nandi's shadow, his anchor in a world that had tried to swallow him whole. They ate together, with Nandi sipping his milk while Sheba grazed patiently beside him, her presence a protective shield. They slept together, with the large, warm body of the cow serving as a living thermal blanket for the small, constantly chilled rhino calf. This closeness was vital for Nandi, regulating his body temperature and, more importantly, calming the hypervigilance of an animal programmed to fear every sound. The caregivers began to observe changes in Nandi almost immediately. The anxious pacing stopped. His appetite returned. He began to play, performing clumsy, joyous trots around his enclosure, always circling back to the quiet presence of his cow mother. Sheba, in turn, began to exhibit startlingly clear maternal behaviors. She would follow him constantly, maintaining a precise proximity. When the calf wandered too far, Sheba would let out that same low, urgent moo, and Nandi would instantly respond, returning to press his flank against hers. This bond wasn't just physical comfort, it was a profound psychological realignment. Nandi was a predator's target, a symbol of vulnerability. Sheba was a domesticated symbol of peace, yet she was rewriting the rules of the wild.
We always knew that the bond was special, but I don't think any of us truly understood the depth of it.
The sanctuary staff realized they were witnessing a genuine interspecies adoption, one driven not by pheromones or species similarity, but by the sheer, overwhelming need for connection and the innate capacity to provide it. It was a biological paradox played out in the sun and dust of South Africa. The cow's calm demeanor was contagious, leaching the trauma from the young rhino day by day. The vets noted that Nandi's physical health tracked directly with Sheba's proximity. When the cow was briefly moved for a routine checkup, the rhino calf reverted almost instantly to his earlier state, pacing, refusing food, and emitting distressed, high-pitched bleats. The cow wasn't just a friend. Sheba was a necessary piece of the calf's survival infrastructure. This powerful evidence solidified the team's commitment. Sheba and Nandi would remain together for as long as Nandi needed her. It was a beautiful, difficult commitment, forcing humans to acknowledge that their attempts at healing had failed, where one gentle cow's presence had succeeded. The relationship was no longer an experiment. It was a sanctuary mandate. The bond between Sheba and Nandi was undeniable, yet it had to face the reality of a modern rhino sanctuary. Routine human interference. Every veterinary checkup, every change of bedding, and every transfer to a larger enclosure was viewed by the cow as a direct threat. Sheba, the placid dairy cow, transformed into a formidable guardian. Her head would lower, her eyes would fix on the approaching human, and a guttural, protective sound, a sound the staff had never heard from her before, would rumble in her chest. When the vets needed to administer medication or tend to Nandi's lingering injuries, they were often met with Sheba's unyielding bulk. She would physically position herself between the calf and the medical team, using her body as a living wall. It became a delicate, almost ritualistic dance, the staff patiently waiting for a small window of opportunity, and Sheba vigilantly closing the distance whenever Nandi showed the slightest sign of distress. They realized that any attempt to separate them by force would cause more emotional harm to the calf than any medical benefit could outweigh. This protective fervor was the proving ground for the bond. It wasn't just passive comfort. It was active, risk-taking guardianship. Sheba was displaying the fierce territorial defense mechanisms of a mother defending her own blood for a creature that was not hers, that did not look like her, and that she was not biologically equipped to nurse. The cow had chosen this role, and she executed it with an almost religious intensity. The irony was thick. The gentle, domesticated animal was teaching the wild, traumatized orphan about the raw, protective force of family. Even when Nandi started to grow rapidly, transforming from a wobbly calf into a sturdy juvenile, Sheba's vigilance never wavered. He would occasionally try to mimic her grazing, a behavior learned entirely by observation, She, in turn, began to gently lead him around the enclosure, nudging him toward the freshest water or the safest sleeping spot. This was the language of guardianship, not spoken, but communicated through weight, presence, and unwavering loyalty. It was a bond forged in shared vulnerability, and it demonstrated that the laws of protection are written deeper than species lines. The emotional crest of their story arrived not in a moment of dramatic rescue, but in a quiet, undeniable display of grief. After nearly a year of continuous companionship, the sanctuary staff made the difficult decision to permanently separate Sheba from Nandi. The rhino was healthy, robust, and approaching the age where his inherent wild instincts needed to be reawakened for future release. The separation was carefully managed, with Sheba being led to a paddock just out of sight. The team believed that the transition would be tough but necessary. What followed was heartbreaking. Nandi, suddenly finding the great, warm presence gone, began to emit calls of frantic confusion, running the fence line with a desperate urgency. More surprisingly, the stoic cow, Sheba, reacted with equal intensity. She let out bellows of distress, pacing her new enclosure, refusing to graze. It was the raw, undeniable sound of a mother who had lost her child. The sight of two different species separated by an arbitrary fence, grieving their forced separation, shattered any remaining scientific skepticism. This was not merely comfort. This was a deep emotional connection that caused tangible psychological pain when broken. The sanctuary realized the depth of the commitment Sheba had made. Her guardianship had evolved into a spiritual dedication. The planned, gradual separation was immediately halted. The two were reunited, and the relief was palpable, a gentle, affirming nudge from the large cow, and a soft, submissive press from the young rhino. The wild could wait. The therapeutic bond could not. The story of Sheba and Nandi now echoes far beyond the quiet fences of their sanctuary. It is a modern-day fable of radical cross-species empathy, a living testament to the idea that love and protection are not merely genetic imperatives, but choices made in the face of profound need. The orphaned calf, robbed of his mother by the harsh realities of the wild, found his most crucial comfort in a creature whose lineage was entirely different, whose very purpose was domestication. This relationship forced the human caretakers and all who have heard the tale to re-examine the boundaries they place on animal sentience and emotion. Nandi, having been healed and grounded by the cow's unwavering presence, eventually grew into a magnificent juvenile rhino, slowly transitioning to the company of his own kind, but never forgetting the gentle giant who raised him. Sheba, the dairy cow who never had a calf of her own, found her purpose in the most dramatic, unforeseen way. Their bond stands as powerful, indisputable proof that the capacity for fierce, selfless love is universal, existing entirely independent of species, biology, or prior experience. It is a reminder that the quietest hearts often hold the greatest courage, and that true family is often found in the most unlikely of forms. The ultimate lesson is that the wound of loneliness requires not a precise species-specific response, but the simple, constant presence of a warm body and an open heart. In Sheba's gentle moo and Nandi's secure lean, we find a powerful, hopeful echo of our own deepest need for connection. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story moved you, please consider liking and subscribing. It truly helps us bring more stories like this to light. We have a question for you. What was the single moment in this story that resonated with you the most? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one.